It looks to me, because there are hundreds of comments coming pouring through from people from all around the world. And I can see lots of people have got their hands up as they are pouring in to take their seats. To the technical people behind meetings of minds, I don't know how many people were allowed on one call, but I already see I see 1,300 people, is it? So welcome everybody from all over the world. Some of you I will have seen in person just recently because we gathered, as you will know, in Oslo for our 20th anniversary annual event, which was just phenomenal. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as we felt you did. We could feel the love, the appreciation. Personally, I think we had 4,500 people there, and I must have at least said hello, shook hands, hugged 4,499. So if you're the one person that I didn't get to say hello to personally, I will see you at the next one. And the next one will be even bigger because what a year. What a year this has been, but what a year we are heading into. Because the reason we are gathered here today is because of a certain thing that we did last Friday. Time is catching up with me. When we gave a gift to the world. And the gift we gave was a brand new way to get a meaningful insight to your health, specifically the gut health test. And we knew. I have Dr. Martina Torissen here today. We've had countless conversations prior to the launch. We know that you need to know more. And if anyone has been paying attention to the news and the media over the past 24, 48 hours, we've appeared in magazines. We're in the microbiology magazine. We were on breakfast morning TV over in the United States of America, and there's more and more of these things coming through because the world wants to know. How did we do it? Why did we do it? And what does it tell people? And what we're going to start off with today is a process of educating. It's going to take some time. And so for everyone there, whether it's morning, whether it's afternoon, evening, or night, take out your pad and paper. Start to make some notes because really this is where we begin. This is where we begin. Last Friday, it fell upon myself and Martina to give this over to the world, and we had Gabrielle there from marketing, and we conveyed a lot. We followed that up with a science panel with some more snapshots. But today, we're going to dedicate, first of all, a presentation from Martina so that she can take you by the hand and lead you through some key critical information about the gut health test, what it's about, what it tells you about, and I guess a little bit about what you can do. And then the aim is to be able to get towards the end of the session. I will have a few questions which I'm going to ask Martina so that we can embellish your understanding. And then if we have enough time, I will select some questions from the chat, and so that we can address some of your questions at this stage. So please use the chat to ask a question. But before you do, make sure somebody else hasn't asked the same question, because we've only been on here a few moments and there's already over 100 comments in the chat box. And it's going to fall on me at some point to sift through and find some questions. So take a look, pay attention. It gives me, as always, huge pride, honor, privilege to welcome Martina to this October edition of Meetings of Minds. And before I allow her to speak and share all of this insight with you, I want to take this opportunity again to thank Martina for the work that she has done on the development of this test. The test and the research and the work has been through many hands, mine included, and it has been passed down and passed forward. And really over these past near 2 years now, Martina has really taken the helm on this. And I can see that we have here somewhere with us, I imagine, we will have also one of our product managers, Sebastian, who has been incredible in this. He has also powered this mission forward. And unfortunately, there's only ever so much time and allowance to get people on stage. And I really wish, if I have any regrets, is that we didn't have an opportunity to take Sebastian on stage with us at some point over the weekend of the annual event. because he has been truly phenomenal in the process of developing this. And so, mindful of time, we only ever have so much. Martina, the stage is yours. Please take us through the content you would like to share. Say hello to all these amazingly good people and cast some light about this phenomenal achievement that Zinzino has given to the world.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I hope everyone can see my screen, because I was planning on just digging right into it.
I can't see. Ah, here we go. I can see it now. Fantastic.
All right. So, when we talk about health today, we often talk about parts, the gut, the brain, the immune system, as if they are separate departments of the same body. But the more we learn, the clearer it becomes that the human body, it doesn't work in parts. It's a system and a network of constant communication. And the gut sits right at the center of that network. When most people think of the gut, they think of digestion. Food goes in and nutrients get absorbed, and then waste comes out. And that is true, but it's only the surface layer of what's really happening. The gut is our largest immune organ, housing about 70 to 80% of our immune cells. And it is also home to trillions of bacteria, which is what makes our gut microbiome, which forms an entire ecosystem living inside of us. And here is what's extraordinary. These microbes, they don't just digest foods, they also talk to the body. And they do it through chemistry, through the molecules they produce as they break down what we eat. And these molecules are called metabolites, and they move beyond the gut wall and send messages that affects our metabolism, our immune system, and even the brain. So the gut isn't just a digestive tube, it is a communication hub, a central interface where the outside world, everything that we eat, breathe, and feel, is translated into signals that guide our inside world, our physiology, our mood, our energy, and our resilience. And over the past 15 to 20 years, new DNA technologies have given us an incredible gift, which is that we could map which microbes live inside of us. And that led to an explosion in microbiome research and also a new way of thinking about health. And then for a while, the question was mainly who is there? Which bacteria are found in people who are lean versus people with obesity? Which ones are more common in those with gut disorders or in those who stay healthy as they age, for instance? And those questions are exciting, but they've also revealed a puzzle, which is that two people can have nearly the same microbiome composition, yet sometimes completely different health outcomes. So the next question became not just who is there, but what are they doing? And that is where metabolomics changed the game. Instead of looking at microbes as names on a list, metabolomics has allowed us to look at what they produce, the chemical fingerprints of their activity. And it lets us see the function of the microbiome, how those trillions of bacteria are actually influencing our biology. And in a sense, these metabolites, they are the language of the gut. They are how our microbes communicate with us. And when that language shifts, when certain messages go silent and other ones become louder, it can change how our whole system behaves. So now when we look at this communication system from a distance, we can see how profoundly interconnected it is. The gut talks to the immune system every second. The immune system feeds back signals that influence microbial activity, and the brain listens to all of it through the vagus nerve and through the molecules that circulates in the blood. So the gut is not a standalone organ. It is a systems organ and a biological crossroad where immune, metabolic, and neural networks are constantly communicating. So when this network is balanced, we see stability across multiple systems. We see steady energy, lower inflammation, and better mood regulation. But when it is disrupted, that imbalance echoes throughout the body, in the liver, in the brain, and even in how we age. And this is where tryptophan becomes such an elegant example of systems biology in action. Because tryptophan is an essential amino acid, which means that we have to get it from food. But what happens to it after that depends on the conversation between our cells and our microbes. And we can think of tryptophan as standing at a crossroads with 3 roads ahead. And the first is the kynurenine pathway, which is the main route handling around 90 to 95% of tryptophan. And this pathway is essential as it produces NAD+, which is a molecule that every cell needs for energy. But it is also the body's stress response. So when inflammation or cortisol levels rise, enzymes like IDO1 and TDO will open the gates wider, which pulls more tryptophan into kynurenine. And if this stays active for too long, it creates a biochemical environment that fuels oxidative stress and immune strain. The second one is the serotonin pathway, which is a smaller road with just about 1 to 2% of traffic. And here, tryptophan becomes serotonin, which affects mood, sleep, and gut movement. And then we have the third road, which is the one that interests us the most, the microbial indole pathway. And this is where gut bacteria, they take tryptophan and turn it into compounds called indole derivatives, including one unique one called indole propionic acid, or IPA. And these are not just byproducts, they are signals of cooperation. When this microbial pathway is active, it tells us that the gut environment is healthy, that the right microbes are being fed, that inflammation is low, and that the body and the microbiome are in balance. So in other words, when the system is under stress, tryptophan will flow into kynurenine more heavily, but when the system is balanced and nourished, it flows more into the indoles like IPA. So that shift from kynurenine to indole metabolism is one of the clearest biochemical signatures of resilience that we can measure. And I like to use this traffic light metaphor where we can think of tryptophan as arriving at a busy traffic intersection. And then we know that diet and microbiome diversity will turn the green light on for the protective indole road, whereas stress and inflammation turns it green for the kynurenine highway. Now we can't change the map, but we can influence and change the traffic. Now let's go more into the details of this unique marker, because IPA is one of the most fascinating compounds discovered in recent microbiome science. And it is made exclusively by certain gut bacteria when they have the right conditions, particularly when they are fed dietary fiber. And its effects reaches far beyond the gut. IPA, it strengthens the intestinal barrier, which is the thin, selectively permeable layer that keeps unwanted molecules out and nutrients in. It also calms immune cells that would otherwise stay in overdrive. And it acts as a powerful antioxidant, protecting cells from oxidative stress. And it even influences metabolism by helping to regulate blood sugar. And what's remarkable about IPA is that it doesn't just reflect a healthy gut, it helps maintain it. It creates a feedback loop. The more IPA your microbes produce, the stronger the barrier becomes, and then the more stable the system stays. So you can think of IPA as a guardian molecule, a molecular signal of cooperation between us and our microbes. And diet is one of the strongest determinants of whether tryptophan flows into the kynurenine or the indole road, and fiber is the single most important driver. Our ancestors used to eat well over 100 grams of fiber a day, but today most people in industrialized countries, they get less than 20. So that shift has completely reshaped our microbiome, and with it, our metabolite balance. When we eat a low fiber, high fat Western diet, microbes lose their preferred fuel source and they start breaking down mucus and protein residues instead, which creates more pro-inflammatory byproducts. And at the same time, immune activity will rise, which pushes tryptophan more heavily into kynurenine. But when we get enough fiber, the opposite happens. Microbes will ferment fiber into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which helps to suppress inflammatory signals and IDO1 activity. And this then frees up tryptophan to flow into the microbial indole routes, producing more IPA and fewer inflammatory metabolites. And fiber doesn't act in isolation. It also interacts with fat quality. So, for instance, our omega-6 to 3 balance will influence this. And it also interacts with polyphenols, which acts like microbial selectors, enriching species that produce beneficial metabolites. And of course, also with lifestyle factors such as stress, sleep, and physical activity, all of which influence immune tone and the enzymes that govern tryptophan metabolism. So health in this light isn't about a single nutrient, it's about coherence and how our diet and lifestyle work together to shape this network of signals. Now, to understand what really shapes IPA production, I want us to look a little closer on its biggest driver, which is fiber. And this figure here shows how fiber is a game changer for tryptophan metabolism through the proposed mechanisms of how it influences it. First, fiber slows down absorption, so then more tryptophan reaches the colon. And then second, when fiber is fermented, we know it produces this short-chain fatty acid butyrate, which can down-regulate IDO1 expression and inflammatory tone, which means then that fewer tryptophan molecules are drained into kynurenine. And then third, fiber feeds the beneficial microbes. So with fiber, we get less tryptophan lost to the stress road and more directed into the protective indole road. And this is why fiber is such a powerful driver of resilience. And population cohorts and intervention studies indicate the same thing. With higher fiber intake, we see higher circulating IPA and more favorable tryptophan ratios. And this is not just in theory, so I want to look more closely into what this balance means in real-world conditions from the scientific literature, starting in the liver. Because in the liver, this balance makes a clear difference. And as you can see on the figure here, in a healthy state, certain gut bacteria will convert tryptophan into indole compounds like IPA. And these IPA can activate a receptor called the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, which is a molecular sensor in the gut lining that detects the signal from the microbes and helps keep the immune system balanced. And when the aryl hydrocarbon receptor is activated by IPA, it strengthens the gut barrier by promoting the renewal of intestinal cells and the production of tight junction proteins that seals the gut wall. And it also calms immune activity and helps suppress inflammation. So the result is fewer endotoxins leaking into the bloodstream, less liver inflammation, and improved fat and energy metabolism. But in metabolic liver disease, when the gut microbiome loses its diversity and indole production drops, the opposite happens. The barrier weakens, bacterial toxins leak through, and inflammation is switched on in the liver through pathways like the NF-kappa beta, which leads to fat accumulation and tissue damage. And in the gut itself, the contrast is just as striking. When the microbiota is balanced, tryptophan is converted into indole compounds like IPA, which, like I said, can activate the aryl hydrocarbon receptor in the gut lining, which strengthens the gut barrier and promotes immune balance and keeps inflammation under control. But in inflammatory bowel disease, when dysbiosis sets in, the microbes that produce these beneficial indoles are reduced, and as a result, more tryptophan is diverted into the kidney pathway, which is driven by inflammation. So the gut barrier then becomes leaky, immune signals turn pro-inflammatory, and chronic inflammation takes hold, which also fuels a vicious cycle that will help maintain disease activity. And the same principle apply as we age. Over time, the gut microbiome often loses its diversity, meaning that fewer beneficial bacteria and a drop in protective metabolites like IPA will happen. And with less IPA, the gut barrier weakens, immune balance shifts, and low-grade chronic inflammation becomes more common in a process often called inflammation. But not all aging follows this path. Studies of healthy centenarians show something remarkable, which is that they often maintain a diverse, balanced microbiome, and they continue to produce indole metabolites, and they preserve strong barrier and immune function. So in other words, aging is not an inevitable decline necessarily. It is deeply influenced by the state of our microbiome and the molecules it produces. The same imbalances that affect our gut and metabolism also reach the brain through what is known as the gut-brain axis. And when the system is imbalanced, the microbial indoles like IPA helps to protect the blood-brain barrier, reduce inflammation, and support the production of key neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine. But when the gut is imbalanced and the barrier becomes leaky, inflammatory signals rise again and kidney pathway metabolites will build up, which is a process that can tip the brain towards stress, mood disorders, and cognitive decline. And this is also why gut health is increasingly being linked to conditions such as depression and neurodegeneration. So, across all these systems, the liver, the gut, the brain, and even aging, we see the same pattern emerges. When tryptophan is channeled into microbial indoles like IPA, we see protection. We see stronger barriers, calmer immune responses, and greater overall resilience. When more tryptophan is diverted into the kidney pathway, we see the opposite: weakened barriers, higher inflammation, and greater vulnerability to stress and disease. So the key takeaway I want you to take from this is that this balance isn't fixed. It is something that we can influence. And diet, especially fiber intake, as well as sleep, exercise, and of course microbial diversity, all shape how this pathway flows. So in other words, the way that we live and eat, it doesn't just feed us. It steers the chemistry that connects our gut, our metabolism, and even our mind. And by resilience, we mean tighter barriers, lower baseline activation, and steadier metabolic control, which are measurable hallmarks of a system that adapts and recovers efficiently. So, now that we know that this balance between indoles and kidneys isn't fixed, it's something that we can shape through what we eat, how we move, how we sleep, and how we manage stress. the next question is, how do we actually see it? How do we measure whether our gut and metabolism are moving towards resilience or drifting towards strain? So this is where measurement becomes powerful, because for decades we've been able to see the microbiome, but not necessarily directly its function. We could catalog bacteria, but we couldn't easily measure what they were producing or how those molecules affected us, and especially not in a simple at-home tool that is affordable. But now we can with the gut health tests. And by measuring 3 key metabolites in blood, which is tryptophan, kynurenine, and IPA, we can get a more functional snapshot of how this system is performing. So we have tryptophan, which shows the available substrates or the fuel at the crossroads. And then we have kynurenine, which reflects immune activation and inflammatory tone. And we have IPA, which reflects the microbial health and cooperation. And from these, we can derive ratios that act as system indicators. The kynurenine to tryptophan ratio, which is our immune stress indicator. The IPA to tryptophan ratio, showing microbial efficiency, and thus is our gut microbiome efficiency marker. And then we have the IPA to kynurenine ratio, which shows the overall balance between protection and stress in our microbiome immune support marker. And when we integrate them, we get the gut health index, which functions as a snapshot of whether your system is leaning towards resilience or strain. And I just want to stress that this is not a diagnostic test. It doesn't label diseases, but instead it provides actionable insights into how your gut and metabolism are working together right now, and how diet and lifestyle can shift that balance. So this is what we measure with the gut health tests. And in order to define meaningful cutoffs in these tests, we haven't turned to disease thresholds. But we've looked at 2 groups in our internal data sets that represent the opposite ends of the dietary spectrum. We have those with low fiber intake and low omega-3, typically with higher inflammation and lower microbial activity, and those with high fiber intake and high omega-3, typically with lower inflammation and stronger microbial function. And across these groups, the pattern is striking. We see higher IPA, we see higher IPA to kynurenine and higher IPA to tryptophan ratios in the high fiber, high omega-3 group, and lower kynurenine to tryptophan, meaning less immune stress. And when we compare those trends to what's published in the scientific literature, we see the same directionality. Higher dietary fiber and omega-3 intake consistently associated with higher IPA and lower kynurenine to tryptophan. So our reference zones, low, moderate, medium, high, and high, they aren't arbitrary. They are grounded in both our internal population and the wider body of scientific evidence. But they don't diagnose disease, they describe direction, where the system is leaning towards resilience or towards strain. And here you can see an example from the test report and how it will appear to the user. And again, I want to emphasize that these zones are directional indicators, and they show you where your biology sits along the continuum from strain to resilience. So this approach, it keeps the interpretation firmly anchored in preventive health, reflecting biological shifts observed in healthy populations and not clinical thresholds. So in other words, the results guide an understanding and action and not classification. So what this really represents is systems thinking in practice. We're not measuring a single molecule, we're measuring a pattern, the interplay between the microbiome, the immune system, and metabolism. And each molecule is like a data point, but when we put them together, they form a picture, a system's fingerprint of how your body is functioning. And that's what makes this so exciting. It's not about replacing medical diagnostics. It's about expanding our understanding of preventive health and about seeing biology as a dialogue that we can influence through diet and lifestyle. So to summarize, when tryptophan flows into microbial indels like IPA, we see cooperation, we see balance and resilience. But when it flows too much into kynurenine, we see strain, inflammation, and reduced adaptability. And because these molecules circulate in the blood, we can now read that balance directly, turning the invisible chemistry of the gut into a measurable window on systemic health. And that's the promise of this approach. It's not just about the microbiome, it's about what it's saying and how we respond. So the gut health test gives us the first practical way to listen, to translate the gut's molecular language into something personal, actionable, and deeply human. And that's also what makes the gut health test the next generation of gut testing, translating this cutting edge science into clear and personal and actionable insights. It bridges the gap between research and real life, which gives individuals a way to understand how their choices shape their biology. And in the bigger picture, it transforms complexity into clarity, from thousands of microbial names to a few measurable molecules that reveal whether your system is trending towards protection or stress. And so again, this is systems thinking brought to life, turning those complex biological networks into something personal and actionable. And because when you can see how your whole system responds to what you eat, how you sleep, and how you live, you can also start steering it towards resilience. So what makes this so powerful is that it represents a shift from observing disease to understanding health. And instead of waiting for something to go wrong, we can now measure how well our system is adapting, how balanced the dialogue between the gut, immune system, and metabolism really is. And this is the essence of preventive health. Not prediction of disease, but detection of imbalance while it's still reversible. And the gut health test gives us a way to see whether the body's internal chemistry is trending towards protection or strain, and more importantly, help guide how to shift it back. Because when we can see change, we can also act on it. And that's how science becomes prevention and prevention becomes empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you very much for that hugely valuable insight. There's so much information delivered there, such clarity given. And I myself paid attention as someone who's reasonably well read and still continued to learn more. And at the same time, I kind of tried to track the chat box and the Q&A, and I've got some interesting comments as well as some interesting questions to pick out of that. But I think you positioned this so elegantly perfect in the way of what it tends to do, how it measures and what it measures and why we do that. And so before we go into any questions, I just want to make a comment on some of the questions. First of all, some of the questions appeared before any of the content had been delivered. My advice would be to everybody is always to listen first and find out what it is that you may be taught. Secondly, there are a few in there that have steered towards the same problem, and you've really dealt with this really well at the end, but I'm going to emphasize it now. This is not a diagnostic test. Zinzino is not a medical organization. We are proudly, proactively prominent in the area of preventative health. What we want to do is empower people to make changes, powerfully positive changes that can enhance their quality of life, that can avoid things going wrong. And if you're in a situation where you are dealing with some kind of health challenge, it is always a good idea to optimize your nutritional health. And that's what we offer. We offer guidelines and we offer products and we offer tests for you to take power of that part of your life. I'm going to swiftly go through a few others so we don't get lost in them. This is not a traditional microbiome test. And it's really important, particularly for those people on here who've started their question with, I'm a health practitioner, I'm a functional health person, I can offer this test. Is it the same? It's not a microbiome test. We are not measuring bacterial strands. It's not a fecal matter test. We're not, that's been done. Sometimes it's been done superbly well. This is the next step. We are taking the whole area forwards. And what we are trying to do, as Martina has said, is position people so that they can actually take a look at the system in process and adjust accordingly. And then one of the comments was, have we measured 5 things because of the 5 things that are in Zinobiotic? I'm no mathematical wizard. I did study statistics, but I am well aware of the fact that we haven't measured 5 things. And likewise, this is not a test that aligns perfectly just to one product. I would position this whereby you look what we offer as Zinzino, straight away it gets behind health protocol, it gets behind balance oil, it gets behind xenobiotic for sure, because it's a way to increase your daily dietary fibers. But also, whenever you look at any kind of immunological factor, the micronutrients play an essential role. So if we're going to really land from that point of view, it gets behind so much of what we do. But guess what? The message is broader. We want you to be more active. We want you to exercise. We want you to take a look at your diet. We want you to think about how your world is. Stress is a big indicator, and we all know that. For thousands of years, people have talked about a gut feeling. I can feel it in my gut. Well, now we can measure it and we can do something about it. And so, on that note, Martina, just as simply as you possibly can, for those people who are listening, how can we give me a really nice, easy, clear difference definition between a typical microbiome test and what it is that we're doing here now?
I think the easiest explanation is that the typical stool sample test or gut microbiome test, which analyzes which bacterial strains are present in your gut, is that tells you who is there. And then there is research on what those are doing. But then again, we know that it's not enough just to have them there. They have to work as they should. So you can consider them workers on a job. And if they're there and not doing their job, then you don't get that signal out, which is what is actually influencing our health. And this is what we call the functional output of the microbiome. And it's the functional output that and the signals that signals to our body what it should do and how, which again then influences our health. So we are moving it further out and looking more systemically and not just guessing based on knowing who is there.
Superb. So with that notion of elimination of tests, can I ask a few questions that are really about the practical aspects of the test? Because this is what I've seen come through. So first of all, what age? What would you say is the youngest age that a person can recommend this test for?
I would say this test is mainly for adults, but then that's because the research in this area is so new and all the data and the values in the scientific literature is from adult cohorts. But that's just to determine which of the values and what they mean. But in terms of understanding the direction of where these metabolites are going, I think any age could be interesting to take the test and just see, but then knowingly understand the test report that this is based on adults and it doesn't necessarily can be interpreted the same for kids.
Yeah, I got asked this question a lot at annual, and I've been asked it a lot since. And mine's been a similar response to yours, but I have said if you look at maturation factors around these systems, if you're looking at late teens, that's probably okay, and you're going to get some kind of an insight, and you might start to track it then. But the reality is, this is more aimed towards those adult populations, which is really anything from 20 plus. Around the test practicalities again, we know we've written it on the guidance content. How should the person take this test, Martina? What are the conditions they need to create in order to take a clear test and do this well and get some reliable feedback?
Well, the instructions we are giving is that you should take it fasted in the morning, so 10-hour fasts, and preferably not the day after you run a marathon or been partying hard, or if you recently had been on antibiotics, for instance, that will also influence the results. So the conditions is that you should take it fasted and on an empty stomach, and you should retest under the same conditions.
You've mentioned antibiotics, but a lot of
Yes.
questions that we're getting and that are in the box is, will medication interfere with the test? So we're aware of antibiotics, and most people are, because of the toll it takes on the gut and actually other factors when we take a blood test. Some people have to take medication on a daily basis. I've got some thoughts on this, which I'll share, but I'm interested in your thoughts first. What would you suggest for those people?
Well, I just first want to clarify that if you have taken antibiotics, it doesn't mean that you can't take the test, but that you shouldn't just know that the results you get might have been influenced by that, since we know that antibiotics does what it does to the gut microbiome. But then that would also be interesting to, after a while, after you stop taking antibiotics, to retest to see if your microbiota has bounced back. But as for medications, there is many different medications that will interfere with the microbiota. But I think it's challenging to give medicine advice, since that's not what I should be doing. But you should keep in mind that whenever you are taking medicine, of course, that is intended to influence your body, so it will have an effect.
And it is difficult to give advice, and I'm not going to give medicinal advice or medical advice. But what advice I'm going to give is that if you have to take medicine on a daily basis as the management of a condition, then that is already the backdrop to your health. And what I would encourage you to do is to take the test, see how your results are, because either way, and this goes for all those people who ask me, I've got this condition, that condition, should I still, look at omega-3? Should I still look at fiber? Yes, you should always aim to optimize your nutritional health. And so to me, if that's your reality, you're taking medication, you take the test, and you still implement those improvement strategies, increase in intake of dietary fibers, polyphenols, more active, more exercise, trying to reduce stress factors in your life, quality of diet, reducing those poor, ultra processed food things. These are still adjustments you can make, but the reality is you have to take long-term medication. So we move forward as that's the baseline. So that would be my advice, is that it's still worthwhile. You can only ever make things better by improving your nutritional health status. So we've looked at the interaction of antibiotics, we've looked at how to take the test, we've looked at the age suitability of people to take this test. So the next obvious question is, when do people retest? When should they take? They've taken a test, they've started to implement really good habits and behaviors and making tweaks. When should they retest and find out how things are going?
What we are recommending is to retest after 120 days, so 4 months.
And why is that, Martina?
Well, we have to set the recommendation somehow, but it could have been otherwise as well, because we know that the microbiome is quite responsive to dietary changes. It can change rapidly, but it also takes some time for it to settle in and to adapt then. So in order for it to manifest all those changes after you made some significant changes to your diet, such as adding more fiber, then you have given it that time in order for it to take place.
I mean, I was a part of the committee that helped to make these decisions, and I'm comfortable with the 120 days because, yes, we know that there are aspects of the gut that respond really, really quickly, and that's fantastic. But also, we got to bear in mind that we're measuring things in blood. And remember, we have the 120 plus minus 10-day life cycle of a red blood cell. And so what we're looking at is those kind of more reliable time-given snapshots. And also, anybody can be good for a day. what we want to do is really lead you towards the development of good habits, and good habits take time. And so if you take your baseline test and you see your score and you start to implement these really positive changes, you are going to be way better off for practicing those on a daily basis and making them the new normal for 120 days. What you're going to get back is far more of a reliable and meaningful insight on the alteration, the change in status, than taking a test, really being good for 4 days, and then taking another test and going, brilliant, I'm off the hook. That's not what we want. We are believers in lifestyle change. We're trying to encourage people to be healthier in every single way, to continue to grow. And so the 120-day, it makes perfect sense in the context of what we understand about blood biology. It makes perfect sense in the context of behavior change. And remember, you are the outcome of the things you do most often, and consistency is key. So we want you to really address this. Now, another question that's come through, and this is one that's less scientific, but I would appreciate your thoughts on this. People are saying, well, how individualized can our recommendations be? So people take the test. How individualized can a recommendation be that we give people?
Well, they are individualized in terms of being based on the scores that you get and which results you get. So on where in the spectrum of the values that you get your results, this is where we put the basis for which recommendations to give back in the tests.
Mm-hmm. And we deal with tens of thousands of people, sometimes even much more than that. And so for us to give, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure that the proponents and the champions of AI here will tell me that I'm wrong, but in order for us to give an absolute specific dietary breakdown that says to a person, now you have this test, this is exactly what you should do, very prescriptive. Well, one, I don't believe that's right, because you are the captain of your destiny. You need to make choices. You're the person who's going to take this information from the guideline, and you're the person who's going to go to the grocery store, who's going to go and make food choices. You're the person who's going to look at what type of balance oil, the zinobiotic, is it 1 scoop or 2? How are you going to introduce that? You're the person. And what we can do is give clear indicators and really solid, reliable guidance on what constitutes a good dietary fiber, what we can offer from a polyphenol point of view. We can give activity guidelines, exercise guidelines, but we can't tell you, each and every one of the 2,300 people who joined us this afternoon, to say, okay, what you need to do is exactly like this. It will become more and more specific to you the more you take ownership of it. And obviously, we continue to create content and guidelines and give advice and recommendations, and that will grow and grow and grow, and we will offer more and more. But remember, at some point, at the center of every action that needs to be taken is the person themselves. And we are here to guide you and empower you to make better choices. So, Martina, let's get back to this remarkable test. There's a lot of people want to say, how does it compare to that? How does it compare to this? It's incomparable. So far, nobody has commercialized a test like this. We've taken you by the hand as a really solid insight as to what the test measures, why it measures that, what it means from a systems point of view. And so hopefully you've captured those notes, and obviously this recording will be made available at some time soon after this event. And please do go back to it, think about it, and learn. That's the key part, is to go through, think about it, take notes, and learn in your own way. But let's talk about some of the science, the groundwork that's been done. Give us an indication of the amount of research articles, hours and days you've spent working and pulling all this research together, Martina, so that people have some awareness of the sheer volume of work that goes into a project like this.
Yeah, well, I can say it's been a lot, and I haven't counted all of it, but I know I have thousands and thousands of pages of research on this topic. And it's also very interesting because there is something called these scientometric papers where they look at how frequent words are mentioned in the scientific literature. And there is also papers on this highlighting how much of an increase in attention this topic has gained over just the past few years. So it is a really growing field where the research just keeps growing and growing, and it's hard to keep pace, but it's so interesting as well. So that sometimes justifies the long hours, I would say.
If anyone thinks I'm distracted, I'm not. The reason I'm looking at my other computer is that I am one of the few people who's very blessed and fortunate enough to have a draft copy of Martina's book on this subject. Anybody who's seen that tiny little book that I've put together will know the opening says all about Martina's book, which will be available at some point soon. And the reason I brought it up on my desktop is I'm just going to skip to the reference section. I want to give you just some idea of the volume, the number of references that were just selected for that one text. So just give me a moment. I'm spinning through. Martina's book is much, 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 much bigger than mine. It's far more in depth, involved. The content is phenomenal. And here I am spinning towards the finish of it. Let me have a look with the reference list. So just on the draft that I have, it is way in excess of 200 references. So that's just the ones that have been selected to make it towards the book draft. So there is a huge amount of reading that's gone on. And then we've engaged with the professional third-party scientific services of universities here in the UK, of metabolomics laboratories. We've had all that work that's been done on behalf of Vitas and Thomas and his team with regards to the technical aspect of making sure that the reliability, the sensitivity, the accuracy, the repeatability of this test is intact and meets with the very highest standards, so that we can give you a test that you can faithfully rely upon. You can take a test, you can get an insight for the first time ever into a systems approach of your gut, and more importantly, you are then empowered to do something meaningful about it. So the time is whittling down. We have a few moments left. If you can give me a few moments patience, I'm going to go back to the comments.
I have one interesting comment I would like to reply to if I can.
Feel free.
I saw there was a comment mentioning that the NAD plus is linked to longevity, and it's from the Kinnurin pathway. So how does that work, given that that is the inflammatory pathway? And this is very interesting because, like I said, when we talk about diet and lifestyle and how that influences where this direction of the pathway goes, it's not necessarily just one pathway, but it's also the different steps within those roads. So Kinnurin is the first byproduct in the Kinnurin pathway, and then the last step of this pathway is producing something called quinolinic acid, which is the precursor to NAD+. However, what we see, for instance, in inflammatory bowel disease or other conditions with epithelial inflammation, is that there becomes a bottleneck in the enzyme that converts quinolinic acid, which is a neurotoxic metabolite when it's in excess. It then inhibits the conversion of this into NAD+. So then we get a buildup of quinolinic acid and we get a depletion of NAD+. And that's why.
So hopefully whoever asked that question was satisfied, and hopefully a lot of other people here who may be considering the same things. There's a lot of re-emerging questions, and actually there was one or two that had hit upon the NAD+. I was kind of going through and having a look. There's been such a response, and we really, really appreciate it. And there is so much information to give. The thing I've enjoyed most this afternoon, I have to say, is Martina, your presentation was phenomenal. This is such a involved, deeply complex area, and the level of insight you've given, simple insight that we can all benefit from in how to place this and how to understand this. And I promise all of you people who are here listening, you will soon, before you know it, within the next few days, couple of weeks, this language of IPA, kinorine, tryptophan, it will become second nature to you. And then what will happen is you'll pay attention. You'll see where this features in other places. For those of you who are health practitioners, medical background, science background, research background, there is a lot here to direct you into some deep reading. And I know that you're going to be hugely impressed and super satisfied by what you see and where this test is placed and what it's going to reveal, not only now, but as we move forward. And I actually want to close this meetings of minds with that thought in mind. So please, all of you, thousands of people, spare me a few more moments. This for Zinzino is a start point. We are going to learn so much by the test data that comes in. We are unlike anyone else because we are champions of crowd science. And you people, and you'll remember if you were in the room, I ordained 4,500 people as researchers on behalf of Zinzino. You are going to test yourselves. You're going to test your families, your friends, your networks, thousands of people from all over the world. We will soon be able to map the world on how this looks. We will learn so much more from that information. We are already planning the upgrade. How can we take this forward? What more can we learn? What more can we do? And so this for all of us is an endeavor. This is a start point. We started in a new way through innovation. We're going to learn so much more. And together, all of you, with all of us, we literally are going to transform how health happens all across the world. This is step one of perhaps a long journey to go, but we're doing it together. We're doing it with conviction, and we're doing it in the best possible way, backed by science, grounded in solid thought and reason, and with clear direction and purpose. And so to all of you, Martina, huge thanks. Sebastian, I know you're here somewhere. I want to say a huge thanks to you too. Everybody at Zinzino, this has been such a team task. People who don't get mentioned enough in the process of this, Thomas Gunderson, Emily Gislovic. I mean, literally, I could go through most of the people that you would see circulating around. And again, I want to take the opportunity to thank Hilda, Orion, and Dag for their unwavering belief that we could achieve something like this. And every single one of you who've ever asked us a question and put pressure on us to do it. We listened and we responded. So until the next time, good people, thank you, Martina. Huge thanks. Stay well, be well, look after each other, and we'll see you all soon.